the attorney met with us the night before the May 3rd hearing, which was the confirmation of the temporary guardian. The April 15th hearing, we knew nothing about. The April 26th hearing, we knew nothing about. There was a total ex parte between Scott Killow, Becky Dempsey, who was the county commissioner, she wasn't even a lawyer, and with Landy and his family. When we were going, the night before when I met with my attorney on May the 2nd, he said, don't worry about a thing. They're going to laugh us out of court because you're the sole managing conservator. You were never notified of this. They can't have this hearing. They're going to laugh us out of court, so don't worry about a thing. Well, when we got there, when Bill and I arrived, my attorney asked for me to come into, he'd been in a private room talking with this gentleman, and he came out and said, we want you to come in here. So I said, okay, and my husband and my daughter started to follow me. My attorney said, no, they need to sit out here. So they sat outside the door. When we got inside, he introduced me to Scott Killow, and he said, this is Scott Killow. He's the ad litem for Humphrey, for Luke. And I said, well, what is an ad litem? And he said, well, he represents the interest of Luke. And I said, oh, when I went to shake his hand, I said, hi, I'm Susan McLendon. I'm Luke's mother. He goes, I know who you are. He said, just sit down and shut up. And I didn't know what to say. I just sat down, and he began to say that the hospital, Baylor Specialty Hospital, said that you're a pest and you're a lawsuit waiting to happen. And I'm here to see that that doesn't happen. And he said, when you looked up everything on Luke's MRI, he said, doctors don't like that. And my attorney spoke up and said, doctors don't like internet doctors. And I said, well, Mr. Mobley, when you were diagnosed with cancer, he said, you've got cancer, you've got 6 months, and you walked out of his office. I said, or did you say, I want to get a second opinion? What kind of cancer is it? I know when my father was diagnosed with cancer, we said, what kind of cancer is it? What kind of treatment options are there? Are there radiation? Are there, chemo? How long does he have? We just asked a lot of questions. I said, did you ask questions of your doctor? And he said, that's none of your business. And I said, I know it's not my business, but what I'm saying is, I was there with Luke to ask questions, to find out about the MRI. I wanted to know what exactly the options were for Luke. And the ad litem said, you've been nothing but trouble, and they want you out of there, and I'm here to see that that happens. He said, now, when we go into the courtroom, he said, you're going to agree to Landy being the temporary guardian. And I said, no. And he said, well, Ms. McLendon, he said, you're going to agree to this, because if you don't agree to this, then I will see to it that you don't get visitation with your son. Well, I just began to cry, and I didn't know what to think. And my attorney, of course, wasn't sticking up for me. I didn't know what was going on, and Mr. Killow got up, walked out of the room. My attorney began to walk out after him, and I was crying, and my attorney said, come on. He said, dry up the tears and come on. So we went into the courtroom, and my husband and daughter followed, and he told them to sit at the back of the room, and he took us up to the front. When we sat down, the judge says, all right, she said, today we're here to appoint Landy the temporary guardian of Luke, and so she said, counsel asked my attorney if I had agreed to this. And so my attorney looked at me and said, Ms. McLendon, do you agree to Landy being the temporary guardian? And I said, no, I don't. I want guardianship of Luke. Well, Becky Dempsey, the judge, said, well, she said, counsel, you've represented to me that this is already a settled matter. What do we have here? And she said, you need to go back out and talk to your client. So Mr. Mobley motioned for me, and we started out of the courtroom, and Killow was right on our heels behind us. My husband rose from the back and my daughter to join us, and my attorney told them to motion for them to sit down. So they took me back in this private room, and again, I sat down with the two attorneys. And Mr. Killow looked at me and he said, Ms. McLendon, he said, this isn't a matter of whether you win or lose. This is a matter of how hard you want to fall. And if you don't agree to this temporary guardianship, I'll see to it that you never see your son. And if you try, you'll go to jail. And I was just crying. I didn't know what to do. And I wrote a sworn affidavit to everything that he had said to me. And I filed it with the court. Of course, they never looked at it. We went back into the courtroom, and we started with testimony, and Landy testified that Luke had left home and that I had thrown him out of the house, and of course his friend said that, and it was just a big bunch of lies. Luke had moved in with his father for 4 days. After the DUI, he was angry with me, and he said, fine, I'm going to live with my father, and that's what he did. And after 4 days, he apologized, and he said, I'll follow the rules, Mom. I said, you're not allowed to go out. He was grounded to the house. His friends could come and see him. He could not go anywhere. And so he finally agreed that he would follow those rules, and he came home. Well, they made it look like he had spent the whole time living with this Tim Ford. Then Bubba gets up there, who I don't even know, who is Landy's friend. I've never even met this guy, and says, yeah, this all happened. He was living with Landy. And it was just, where was he living? And you know, it was just a horrible fiasco. And I wanted to get on the stand, and my attorney said, no, no, no. And it was just, that was it. The judge said, well, she said, you know, this meeting has got to end. I have got meetings all afternoon. This was supposed to be over with quickly, and I thought this was already taken care of. We're going to have to meet again tomorrow, 3 o'clock. So everyone will be here tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Well, after it was over, Mr. Killo took me back into the room and said that if I showed up tomorrow, that I would never see my son again. And he took me back in the private room again. And that was all. So I left. I talked to my attorney, and I said, well, will you go and represent me tomorrow? Because I want to see Luke, and maybe he can do this, I don't know, but if you'll go and represent me, and I won't go. So while they were in court, and my attorney went back the next day, I went to go see Luke at the hospital. It was my visitation. I was allowed to go that day on Wednesday. And when I got there, Luke wasn't there, and they wouldn't tell me where they had taken him or where he was.